Hello and welcome to the Business of Story. I'm your host, Park Howell, and author of the new book, Brand Bewitchery. It'll guide you step by step through my proven story cycle system to help you laser focus your brand narrative. And it will teach you how to excel through the stories you tell about your business. So you can grab your copy now on Amazon or Apple Books. Today, we explore what goes into launching a successful startup, sharing your brand story, and protecting your intellectual property in the process. But first, my story marketing moment for you. So often, entrepreneurs understandably fall in love with the product or service that they've created, but they don't connect with their investors or customers because they use the energy of their brand story to talk about what they make versus what they actually make happen in the lives of the people they serve. Consider brands that focus their message on outcomes instead of their offering. For instance, Red Bull. They make an energy drink, basically a commodity, but they command nearly half of the global market because they talk about what they make happen. Red Bull gives you wings. Airbnb is another great example. They provide travelers unique homes to call their own around the world and a great little business model for the hosts of those homes. But what they sell is the brand ethos of the fact that you can belong anywhere. One of my favorite storytelling brands is Airbnb. However, one of my all-time favorites of reframing a brand story from what you make to what you make happen is the American Cancer Society. They provide answers, guidance, and support for those individuals and families battling cancer. But what they make happen is saving lives by helping find cancer's causes and cures. So what they do, they crafted a brilliant reframing of their core brand deliverable when they deemed themselves the official sponsor of birthdays. The unique value proposition they used for the campaign was this: together with our millions of supporters, the American Cancer Society saves lives and creates more birthdays by helping people stay well and get well, by finding cures and by fighting back. Some of the themes that guided this campaign included ideas like singing happy birthday is actually a victory song. A world with less cancer is a world with more birthdays. There's no such thing as too many candles. And join our global movement to create a world with more birthdays. Don't you just love how they changed that from what they make to what they make happen? More birthdays in the world. I love this campaign so much that I included their spot in the show notes, so check it out. Now, as you consider your brand story and how you're telling it, are you bragging about what you make or sharing what you make happen for the people you serve? Believe me, this one paradigm shift in your brand storytelling will make a world of difference in your success. But don't take my word for it. Devin Miller has seen the same thing.
Engineers are the worst salespeople. And the reason is because they want to focus on all the really cool things that it does. And, and hey, it can do this feature and it can do that and it can do this. And this is awesome. And look how we program this. And yet you miss out on telling people why they need this. And there's a difference between the features versus how it impacts their lives.
Devin Miller, CEO and managing attorney at Miller IP Law in Utah, loves startups. He runs a patent and trademark law firm to help startups and small businesses grow their companies and protect their ideas in the process. He founded his own first startup while earning his law and MBA degrees. Since then, Devin has founded several 7- and 8-figure startups and said he enjoyed every single minute of it. Devin joins us today to share some IP wisdom for your brand, including the people you surround yourself with may be more important to your success than your idea. Why customer service is your key differentiator, no matter how brilliant your offering is. Finding your niche and why your education and degrees could actually hold you back if you let your past define your future. Plus, at the end of the show, I share my biggest mistake in business that cost me a fortune because I let my ego and not my intellect guide me into a horrible hole. Spoiler alert, it was about trying to protect my intellectual property. So let's get rolling with Devin Miller of Miller IP Law. Devin, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me here. Excited to be here.
You are coming to us from beautiful Utah, the absolute best snow on the planet, if you ask me. Are you guys getting a light dusting up there yet?
We did. I got about an inch or two of snow on Saturday. And I remember I was going out to run this last Monday. I like to run in the mornings. And I walked out and then I walked back in. My wife's like, I thought you were going out for a run. I'm like, yeah, I got to put on a second. It was -1 outside. So I had to go put a second jacket on top. So it's getting a little cold.
It was already below zero?
It was. So
wow.
It was -1. I'm like, okay, it's cold to run outside. I got to bundle up a little more.
Well, I guess you can salute the COVID summer of 2020 goodbye in Utah.
Very true. Well, if we can't burn it or we can't melt it, we'll freeze it. So
now, Devin, you are in the IP world, the intellectual property world. You've got an IP firm up there. You reached out to us because you are primarily focused on working with startups. And what is it about the startup world that you like so much?
A couple things. One is I'm a startup guy by nature. So in addition to my law firm, I've actually done a few startups and small businesses myself. So I've done a few that I started all the way back in MBA school, and I did my law degree and MBA degree in the same time, that have grown to now, some of the businesses grown to 7- and 8-figure businesses. So I love just the startup world and all of that in general. And then beyond that, when I looked at, and I worked for, some top 100 law firms across the nation, the biggest law firms out there. And I always looked and said, which clients do I like? What do I prefer? And it always came back to, I like the startups and the small businesses the best. That's the clients I just love to work with, enjoyed working with. So I'm like saying, if I start at my own law firm, I want to work with the clients that I enjoy working with. Those are the fun ones. If I work for, and I worked for, the big clients, the Amazon, the Intel, Red Hat, Ford. And I was always felt like I was a small cog in a very big wheel. And I could see a very small picture of the big thing that I was working on. And with the startups and small businesses, you are working on what they are getting to release. It's one shot, they're shooting for the moon, and it's a ton more fun to work with them.
What kind of businesses did you start up?
Yeah, so a few of them. One of them was, this is the one that I mentioned in the MBA school, was a wearables company. And this was before wearables were cool, right? So in that day, it was 2012 to 2013. It was honestly, they didn't have the Fitbit out. They didn't have the Apple Watch out. They didn't have anything out. And it was going back to running, and I was in a business competition, and if I wasn't busy enough, I was doing an MBA degree, a law degree at the same time. I was working about 20 hours a week. I had my second kid. We just had that, and I was married. And I decided, why not? Let's try one more thing. So I got on that, and I said, okay, we entered the first year, and it was kind of something that was, making gym bags less smelly. Didn't work out. We decided to move on. So the group I was with, we're kind of brainstorming. And I remember walking back home, and I just ran my first marathon. Did a horrible job. I did fine on time, but I didn't drink enough. I was like, all these hydration stations, I don't need them. I'll just skip them. It'll make my time faster. Horrible idea. Never recommend it. And so as I was coming back, so I learned my lesson. You don't stop the hydration stations. It's very painful. It makes it so you have a worse marathon. So I said, wouldn't it be great if you had a wearable or, something you can wear that would tell you what your hydration level is? You could, and from whether you're a runner, an athlete, or anything else. So that was a genesis. Went back, pitched it to the group, started the business, entered it in the business competition. I got to the end, and we were all graduating, going our separate ways, going to different states. And I said, hey, I think this is enough of a business. I'm going to buy out my partner. So I bought out the rest of the partners, kept on, brought on, worked on it, side hustle, brought on investors, built it up. And then we ended up merging with another company that's in the wearables and for diabetes monitor, a lot of overlap in technology. So that's continued to evolve. So that's probably the first and the biggest entrance into them. And then I've done a few others along the way as well.
And what was the biggest pitfall you had in that startup that now informs the work you do today in consulting startups?
Yeah, I think that figuring out there's a few, and that's always a hard question, but figuring out the right people to bring on at the right time. And it's not the same thing. The right people may not be for the right time. You need some people at different times of the business. And if it's early on for us, it was, hey, we needed technologists. We needed people to actually see if this is work. And then we needed salespeople, and then we needed a marketing team, and then we needed people that could actually bring on investors. And so it wasn't that, it was finding those right people along the right way. And so, early on, we probably held off too long. We tried to bootstrap it too much, or we tried to keep it into ourselves too much. And that kind of, hindered or at least or slowed down the growth and the progress of the business. And once we finally said, hey, we can't do it all, we need to bring on other people, let's find those right people, that's when it continued to accelerate and really take off.
So you were running past the hydration stations on your startup too, it sounds like, and not getting...
It's a common theme that I have to continually learn. It's a hard lesson to learn.
It sounds like, well, you're a hard charger and you're like, I've got this thing and away we go, right?
Well, it's a complete side note, but I would argue, working both as a startup guy myself and a lot of startups, is everybody thinks that as a startup person, you can do everything the best, right? You always think that you can do everything better than everybody else. You're smarter than everybody else. Sometimes you may be, but most of the time you're not. And even if you can't do it all yourself. So that's a hard lesson I've had to learn is, hey, I can't do it all myself. And even if I could theoretically be the best at everything, I'm never going to get everything done.
So true. Who was a big mentor in your life to get you to where you are today?
Yeah, I mean, maybe as cliche as it sounds, really, my father was one of the bigger mentors in the sense that I grew up watching him. He did a full-time job and he had a lot of side hustles or started building some businesses. And then as I was a bit older in life, he started his own business. And so he was on an engineering firm. Since then, on some of the projects, we actually work very close together. We continue to work. And so it's growing up, saw him do his own businesses. Now, as I've gotten older and got my own businesses, we've got to work together. And that's just been throughout my whole life, a great mentor of how to run businesses, how to do things, how to do startups, how to, grow things. So it's been really fun.
And why then have you somewhat mothballed your startups in the wearables and the other technologies that you worked on to do the startup of Miller IP? What was it about the law world that attracted you?
I honestly don't know that I mothball it. I just have doubled the amount of work that I do. So I probably work a 70-hour work week most of the time. And so it's 40 or 50 hours on the law firm side and on some weeks, and 20 hours on the startups the other weeks, and some weeks it flips. And so it's a fun journey, but it's never the same week every week. But, when I looked at it, I was saying, a few things. Intellectual property, whether it's patents or trademarks or copyrights, is something that is beneficial. And I saw it a lot with my own companies and the ones I work with, to be able to add value, to be able to both protect what you're doing as well as to generate an asset for the company, something that's investable, something that you can actually show we have value with our company. And I said, you know what, it's, a bit of an unfair system in the sense that the ones that probably need it the most are the startups or their small businesses, and yet they're the ones that have the hardest time affording it. And so when I said, how can we at least how can I set up a firm? How can I do that so that not only am I benefiting from being able to do my own patents and trademarks, but be able to help others doing it as well? So that's kind of looking at how can we, a little bit in the business community, serve the underserved community of the startups and small businesses, so they're getting every bit as good of service and every bit as good of representation, while trying to make it a bit more economical, and really just taking the time to teach them what they're doing, how it works, what their process is, and what their reasons and motivations are.
You are a huge self-described fan of Shark Tank. Never missed an episode, I understand.
I have not. And it started out that I just loved it. And then I got my wife into it. And they said, we always watch, just as a complete side note, for our kind of a date night type thing. After we put the kids to bed, every Sunday night, we watch shows together. And it's just kind of a fun time that we just relax together and do something. We used to watch a few other shows and said, well, I always loved Shark Tank, and we didn't have any other shows. And so I said, why don't we watch that together? And since then, she's watched almost every episode. So I've watched it since the beginning, when it was like the crappy not crappy, that's bad. The small entrepreneur that didn't have any money, crazy ideas. Now it's everybody has a whole bunch of money and sales. But I remember every episode. I'm a huge fan of Shark Tank.
So let's put you on Shark Tank. You were there, and a startup walks onto the set, and they pitch their story. What's the first biggest problem you see in that pitch?
I'll put IP aside because that's always where I jump to as an IP attorney. But really, probably it's not no earth shattering. It's the people that are on board. I'm convinced if you get great people on a startup and a mediocre idea is much better than a great idea and mediocre people. So it really, I would look at, hey, are these people that I can believe in that are really going to take this to the next level that I can invest in that can really take this and make it something huge? And if they have that right personality, have that right experience, they have that right drive, that's who you're investing in. And that's even when the companies I've started and the companies I've seen that I've worked with that have taken off, it really is the biggest difference is the person behind the company as opposed to any given idea.
I am a big proponent of all brands, and especially startups, is that your brand story is not about what you make, but what you make happen in people's lives. And I see this a lot in the startup world and rightly so, the inventors and the founders are so infatuated with their own idea and their own product that they think it kind of sells itself. So they roll out the features and they roll out the functions and only gloss over the benefits. Have you experienced that same thing?
Yeah, and I would say even worse is that you start to drink your own Kool-Aid of it can be a bad idea, but you convince yourself it's the world's best idea. But yeah, I think that you start to sell yourself on the product so much and you're so in love with the product that sometimes you don't look to say, are we taking the opportunities that are presenting ourselves? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to go to a different direction? Are we listening to the marketplace, to the feedback with the customers? And really, if you're so bought into your own product that you can't hear that feedback, you can't hear that, what we need to do to change and be better and how to present it. The other thing that I always get into, is engineers are the worst salespeople most of the time. Some of them are good, but a lot of engineers, and the reason is because they want to focus on all the really cool things that it does, and hey, it can do this feature, and it can do that, and it can do this, and this is awesome, and look how we program this, and yet you miss out on telling people why they need this. And there's a difference between the features versus how it impacts their lives. And if I were to take, just as an example, you take trademarks or patents, I can tell you what a trademark is. A trademark, it gives you an exclusive right to stop somebody from manufacturing, selling, otherwise producing a product. And the people are going to either start to gloss over because they're saying, well, that's great, I don't really know what that means. Or you can say, a patent is something that helps you protect your business so that you can stop others from copying you. It also is an asset that you can get angel investors and venture capitals to invest in. Which one is going to be much more impactful? It's going to be the latter, because they say, oh, that's why I need it. That's the benefit. And then they're going to be much more likely to see the reasons why to use the product or the service, as opposed to, again, a patent is a thing that is exclusive right to help stop people from manufacturing or producing or otherwise selling, and nobody's going to care about that. So that's always what I agree with.
A patent is what you make, but what you make happen is the protection of that idea.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Yep. So tell us some of the different work that you've done, some of the products that maybe we are aware of out there, in some of the patent work that you've done to protect these products.
Yeah, and that one's hard. I mean, startups and small businesses, most of them you probably haven't heard of. So I would go back to almost the Amazons, the Intels, and the Intels, it's going to be all on the chip level. And that's going to honestly be more boring than everybody else. I think it's interesting, but I'm a nerdy engineer at heart. So it's, how do I make a microprocessor more secure so somebody can't hack it? Nobody knows even what that is. And I could dive into the details of enclaves and other things. One of the ones that you'd probably know that I worked on for a while was the Kindle reader, the e-ink readers that they have out there. Some of them that have the backlight that actually illuminate. I did a lot of the patent work on that one. So that one's probably the one that or people in general would know best, is that one. Some of the other fun ones that people have never heard of, but I think are pretty exciting. So I do a lot of work in augmented reality and virtual reality, which is just a fun area to be in. And so that one is a company that's called Aether. They do it a lot in the industrial and kind of training workers and other things. That one's a really fun one. One that nobody's ever heard of, but I think is a really fun idea, was it was just a individual solo inventor, and she came up with an idea that you would put basically magnetic strips inside the washer or a dryer, sorry, not washer, dryer. And then pet hair, as it bounced around, it would actually remove the pet hair. So you just put this magnetic strip in your dryer. As you dried everything and it banged into it, it would, or it'd have sticky tactfulness, and it actually remove pet hair. And I thought that is a great idea. It's a simple idea, and yet if you've ever had pet hair on your clothes, it's the most annoying thing to get off. And so that was a fun one, just as kind of a complete aside. Nobody's ever heard of it, but it's a fun one.
Now that is a useful product right there. Speaking of virtual reality and augmented reality, our son Parker, who's over in Hollywood, does a ton of work directing what he's now calling mixed reality, because you bring in all these different virtuals and augmented and whatever. And they did a live stream on Twitch of Dungeons and Dragons, used 4 robotic cameras. They had all these cosplayers show up in their costumes, and they did 3.5-hour live stream on Dungeons and Dragons with video walls on either side of the table, and would pull up real time these monsters that would come at you depending on what the quest was. So I don't know, they had 5,000 video assets ready, and they had to plug in the right one depending on the roll of the die and everything. But he has been fascinated by the augmented virtual reality world. He gets his software and he says, Dad, it's still all so new that we are constantly having to hack it and tweak it and rewrite some of the code to make it do what we want to do. Now, in doing that, is that messing with patents in any way, shape, or form? Or is it just like, no, this isn't quite there and we needed to do this, so we're going to make it do that?
So it's probably a bit of both. So when you say messing with patents, that can mean a couple different things. One, it can mean, are you infringing somebody else's patents? And 2, it can mean, are you building something that's patentable, right? So it kind of has both of those meanings. So taking both of those. So, patents are one where you're typically building a lot of times, unless you just completely come up with something that nobody else has ever thought of at all, which is incredibly difficult because, to create something that has no foundation anywhere, very, very, very seldom happens. Most of the time you're adding it. So take the television as an example. First, we came out with the black and white television, right? That was around for a while. And then we built onto that and did the color television. Well, as you built on the color television, a lot of the foundation of it was still built on the black and white television, a lot of the same technology. Same thing if you're to go to augmented reality. So a lot of times you're taking what others have done and then you're building on top of it. You're improving it. You're making it better. You're changing it. You're doing something that hasn't been done, but you're having the foundation. So typically on a lot of that, when you talk about your son and patents, it would be, he's likely using other patented or a foundation of other patented material, but then as they're tweaking it, as they're hacking it, they're making it do things that previously weren't done. You're building your own patentable material kind of on top of that foundation.
Yeah. What about the argument that patents are only for rich people, in that, number one, they cost a lot to do, but they cost even more to defend, and you create a patent and, a big brand takes a fancy to it and just comes and takes it and says, so sue me.
No, first of all, I think that there is some truth to that. If I was fair, and that's the whole legal system in general. It's not just patents. The legal system is favorable to people that have more money. You can afford better attorneys. You can make better arguments. You can try and get a reduced sentence. You can leverage your influence. I mean, it's just, and I'm not saying it should be that way. It just is that way. Now with the patent, the patent and intellectual property system specifically, I think there are a few ways that you can combat that. So if you're to take, let's say, you're a small startup, you have the world's best idea. And Apple, and I'm just going to pick on Apple, not that Apple deserves it. Maybe they do. They're very litigious. But you take Apple and they come along and say, we're going to just squash you like a bug. We can outspend you. We can drag you through court, and we can make it so your patent will never see the light of day, and we'll put your company out of business. They have enough money. They can obviously do that. But what you can do is, one, you can go to their biggest competitor, because almost every company has a competitor. Apple has Samsung, right? Samsung and Apple have been duking it out for forever on a lot of consumer products. And you say, Samsung, we can't defend this, but guess what? You guys have the money. We have a great technology that Apple is ripping off. You can buy this, put it in your products, and then you can go stop Apple, and it gives you that competitive edge. So you make, one of the tactics you can take as a startup, as a small business, if you're really saying, hey, we can't compete, they are ripping us off, is let's go to their biggest competitor and license it or sell it to them and let them fight the battles. Another thought is, it's kind of a hit or miss or bittersweet within the patent industry, is they're what's called patent trolls or non-practicing entities. And they get hammered, sometimes rightfully so. Sometimes they're just very unethical individuals, but sometimes they allow a startup and a small business that can enforce it themselves to go to those entities that is what they do, is go and enforce patents, and they'll do it for a percentage or a commission based type of a thing, and they'll enforce it for you. So that's another option that you can say, hey, we can't enforce it. We have spent a lot of money and effort to get this patented. Let's have somebody else do it for us. The last thing, and then I'll make a pause, is, you can also take the approach of, yes, we are not big enough today. We can't go fight those battles, but hey, we can still go and grow. We can build strength. And in 2 or 3 years, when we are bigger, or 5 years, when we are bigger, we're going to go tilt at that windmill. We're going to go fight that battle, and we're going to win it. So sometimes you have to say, we can't fight those battles today, but we're still doing good as a company. We're still being profitable. And when we do get big enough, then we're going to go fight those battles and we're going to win. So there's a few different options that you can even take as a startup or a small business.
And in my 35 plus years in the advertising marketing world, I've never done any patenting and never had anything patented, but I certainly have had a lot of things trademarked on behalf of our company, copywritten, and on behalf of clients. One thing that I learned, we did this water conservation campaign called Water Use It Wisely, and we launched it in 1998, only to find out that there was an enormous market for it across the country because cities and states had this mandate to communicate water savings, and it had just come down, but they had no materials. They had nothing. And they had typically limited budgets, so hard to go out and find an agency to come in and work with it. So we created Water Use It Wisely. We trademarked everything, and then we resold it, licensed it across the country. We had over 400 private and public entities buy into that program. We had a few infringements here and there, but really for the most part, it wasn't a problem. But one thing I learned in all of that, my legal attorney at the time says, you have to be a watchdog. You have to keep an eye out for any infringement at any time, and you have to nip it in the bud, because if you don't, then you will be demonstrating that you're really not all that interested in that copyright or trademark. And if you are not defending it, it loses its impact and you can lose the whole thing. Is that the same sort of guidance that you provide? And I suppose that's still true today.
Yeah, it is good. It was good advice by your attorney, so kudos to him. So it would be about the same as trademark, is particularly in trademarks, a little bit in copyrights, a little bit in patents, but it really hits home on trademarks. Is if you have a trademark and you don't actively enforce it, then it devalues it. And second of all, it can get to the point that it just doesn't have value. It means that if you don't enforce it for long enough, they're going to say, hey, you're not actively patrolling it. You're not actively enforcing it. You've allowed others to use it. You've almost given it to the public domain. You've given it to the public because you haven't enforced it. And so, yeah, you have, if you're a trademark, and you can't necessarily aware of every single person out there. You can't be going after every single person. But if you're not actively going or actively watching it and making sure you're monitoring it, it can present that problem to where you'll lose a trademark.
In the startup world, Devin, when should a founder really start looking at trademarking, copywriting, or patenting something, because it is an expensive process, or it can be, especially in the patent world? How long do you coach them to do their proof of concept and get some ideas out there to see if this is even worth spending the time and money on? But also that balance of, you don't want to reveal your hand too quickly to too many people, because maybe it is a great idea and someone else is going to swoop in and take it from you.
So it's a biased answer. I would say it's not too early to go talk to an attorney, to a patent attorney or an IP attorney, in the sense that they may tell you, and if they're a good one, like I said, we do free consultations or free strategy sessions where we just will sit down, talk with you for a few minutes, walk through what you're doing. And I'll give you the honest answer. I said, I've done enough startups and small business. I'll say, hey, you're too early. You should wait. You should hold off. But just as a general thing, you're better to ask those questions too early than too late. Too early means you can get a strategy, you can get a roadmap. Too late means you're already behind the 8 ball and you're creating a lot of issues. Now, to the heart of your question, when should you get started? I look at it as, first of all, before you should, whether you should get started, you should know what your business is, right? In the sense that, 30-second overview: patents are for inventions, trademarks are for brands, copyrights are for creatives. And so you need to look and see, what is my business actually about? Is it about the brand? Am I the next Starbucks? Am I the next M&M's? I don't have anything that's patentable. I don't have anything that's creative, but I have an awesome brand. And then you say, okay, Now, if I have the brand, or if I say, no, I don't really have a great brand yet, but I got this awesome widget, I got the next iPhone that's going to knock everybody's socks off, then you're going to say, I'm really a patent. We got patents are what we need to do. Or I'm going to write the next best, Tom Clancy novel. And so I need to go get a copyright. So first it is, you say, what is our business? What is our value? Where are we actually going to grow the business and make our money off of? And so once you identify that, then you can start to say, when do we need to get started? Because they're all a bit different on between each of them as to what it is. So is a patent, if you're looking at it, really to get a patent started, there are kind of two gating things. One is anytime you put it out in the public, you have a year from which you can then get or file a patent on. If you wait longer than a year, if you're more than a year after you put it out in the public, you've gone too long, you've missed a deadline, you can't file a patent. So that's too long. When you should start, it's more of on the when you can describe your invention at a level that's called conceptual reduction of practice. You could go talk to somebody in the industry, tell them what your product is, how it works, and they can say, okay, yeah, I get that. I can reproduce it. I can make it myself. I don't actually have to go out and do it, but you have that level of detail. And that's kind of for patents. Start when you can actually explain it to somebody in the industry and they can understand it, reproduce it. Don't wait longer than a year after you put it out in the public.
Gotcha.
Trademarks, you're going to look and say, and then switching over to trademarks, when should you start on trademarks? And that's really look at the brand of how you're doing it. So if you're saying, hey, we're a mom and pop shop, we're only ever want to be a mom and pop shop. We just want to serve the local community. We just want to have a restaurant. And we want to have a small store. We're never going to grow any bigger. Then you really probably don't need a trademark. If you're just going to be serving the local community, that's all you want to ever do, then then stop there. But if you're saying, hey, we want to grow, we want to franchise, we want to be the next Starbucks, we want to be the next, whatever, we want to be the next Chick-fil-A or whichever one you like, then you're going to say, that's where our company is. Then you want to start before you get big. You want to start, because what you don't want to do with the trademark is get to where you start to build a brand, you start to get traction, only to find out somebody has already trademarked this, the brand's already taken, and now you're having to rebrand, you're having to spend all that time, money, and effort you put into the brand to figure out a new brand. And so really you're going to say, if we're going to go big, once we get the brand established, once we understand what that is, then let's go for the trademark. Copyright, once you write the book, once you make the movie, once you make the sculpture, once you take the picture, go get a copyright. That one's pretty simple. As soon as you create it, go get your copyright.
Yeah, and one of the simple little free hacks that I've learned, and it's served me well, is if I'm putting in for a trademark, I can go ahead and put that TM on that logo, on that that visual that I've created, even though I don't yet own the trademark. But by putting it there, it's signifying that I'm in the process of getting one, and that I am owner of that particular mark.
Yeah, it kind of puts people on notice. Hey, right now I don't have a registered trademark. I intend to. I also think this is a trademarkable term, and I'm going to defend it as such. So yeah, I think that's a good place to start as you're going through the trademark process. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, in your guest intake form, we asked people to send in just to give us some background on them. You had talked about, and one of the main points that you wanted people to take away today is this idea of you don't have to fit into a box. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that people, they have, you watch the movie, you watch the TV show, and you say, this is a typical startup. This is, if I'm going to get a patent, I have to be a technology. I have to make the next iPhone, or I have to make the next, Facebook or something of that. And if I'm going to be a brand, I have to be the next Nike or the Starbucks or the Apple. And I have to fit into this, very small defined boxes to what a business is. And yet I think it's far from the truth, in the sense that one is you don't have to. There's a lot of different businesses out there that do very well, and that you can build something to it. So I think is to find your passion, find what you're excited about, because now find something that people are willing to pay for.
That's what I was just going to ask you.
Go ahead.
When can passion trump reality?
Yeah, I mean, I think if your passion is for something that's not, people aren't willing to pay for it, you shouldn't pursue it. In the sense that you look at it and say, I'm going to make the best. I'm going to be the best basket weaver, and nobody wants to buy your baskets. It doesn't matter how good of a basket weaver you are. You're still not going to. I could practice. I could be so passionate about basketball. I could practice every day. I can guarantee I'm never going to make it into the NBA. So people aren't going to pay me for it just because I'm passionate about it. On the other hand, if you can say, now, I found something that people are willing to pay for, and I love it. I really just want to do that. That's where the good medium is. And so I think that, getting outside the box, and you can do a lot. Legal industry, and I keep going back to the legal industry. But when we looked and I said, I'm going to start the law firm, Miller IP Law, what are the things that I dislike about the legal industry, in the sense that legal industry is a very box type of thing that's been done for hundreds of years the exact same way, slow to change. You usually get partners at the firm that are, in their 50s, 60s, 70s. They've been doing it this way their whole career, and they don't want to change. And yet I said, how can we do this differently? And so we set up the whole firm as, let's think or go outside the box. Let's not just take the status quo. And I always push against, whether it's our marketing people on the team, whether it's our other attorneys, say, are we doing this because that's the way it's always been done? Or are we doing it because that's the way it makes sense? And if it's not the same thing, we do it the way that makes sense, not the way it's always been done, and we'll change it so that it makes sense, at least to us. And so I say, okay, I get it. And I think that's what a lot of people have to do is, 1, find your passion, 2, find what people are going to pay about, and then 3, it needs to make sense to you. And if you can find those things, that's where you're going to find that sweet medium.
And to your point, IP firms are a dime a dozen, because we are all commodities unless we tell a better story and act into and deliver on those promises. How do you guys do a little bit differently there at Miller IP Law?
Yeah, I'll give you the very simplest example, and yet it's one that I feel like should be done by everybody, and it's not. So customer service, everybody knows customer service, and it seems like it's a straightforward thing. Interesting fact, across all the legal field, anytime you reach out to an attorney, whatever the type of attorney is, it takes 3 to 5 days for them to get back to you. That means if you try and call them, try and email them, text them, whatever it is, it takes them 3 to 5 days to get back to you. That is a long time for somebody to, especially if you're trying to give them your money. Yeah. If you're saying, I want to hire you, it takes you 3 to 5 days. It takes you a full business week to hear back from them. Completely aggravating. So one thing we said is, customers want to know what's going on, or potential clients want to actually hear from you. So we set it up. My general rule is we almost always will respond to your email, to your call, whatever, right away. If we're caught up or we're busy, 90% of the time, we'll respond within 30 minutes. And 100% of the time, our goal is we will respond to you by the end of the day. So very worst, you're going to wait for the end of the day. 90%, you're going to hear back from us in less than 30 minutes if we don't pick up right away. That's a simple thing, and it is one that the legal industry is horrible about. They just do not have good customer service. So that was one of the things. Another one of the things that I always found is, especially for startups and small businesses, is they're always very hesitant to go into a law firm. And the reason is because they feel like as soon as they walk in the door, they're going to hear the cash register, ka-ching, ka-ching, as the dollar bills rack up, and they have to start paying the attorney as soon as they walk in the door, because everybody wants all the attorneys to set up on billable hour. If you're going to talk to me, if you talk to me for 5 minutes, I'm going to round it up to a half an hour, and I'm going to charge you a whole bunch. So we said, what is one way that you can remove that kind of that contention, that they feel like they can actually talk with their attorney, they can actually get advice, and they're not so worried about paying for it that they worry, should I send this email? Should I not send this email? Because they're probably going to charge me for it. So 1, we don't charge for questions. If you ask us a question as a client, we just answer the question. It doesn't show up on your bill. 2 is we also set up free strategy sessions. They come in and they can sit down with us for or up to half an hour, ask any questions they want, get any free advice they want. We don't charge them. And not only that, it's not just, hey, free advice, but I also take it from the business perspective, which is another thing that's missing in the legal industry. I always say that the attorneys give you great legal advice and terrible business advice. Most attorneys, they've never run their own business. They don't have any business experience. They don't even know what an ROI is, a return on investment. They don't know anything. And they just are really they know very well legal. You can ask them legal questions. They know it. And yet you get into business stuff, most of them have very little knowledge. And so I said, now let's offer, as part of what we do, the legal perspective, or not just the legal perspective, the business perspective. What does this make sense for your business? Not just can you do this legally, or can you not do this legally, but should you do it? Does it make, so we kind of incorporated that into our culture. So though I know I gave you a whole bunch, those are just a few things, but that's kind of when I say thinking outside the box, even within the legal industry, most of that's not being done, and it's not that hard. And yet, because people are used to doing it a certain way, and it's always been done that way, they keep doing it that way, and it leaves a lot of opportunity for those that are willing to say, what is a better way of doing it?
Yeah, and given your background as a startup entrepreneur, the business side of it. the angst that goes into it, the sleepless nights, the how am I going to make ends meet, and is this even worth doing? So I would imagine you can appreciate and empathize with what your customers are going through.
Yeah, exactly. And I said it's one of those that, the biggest thing we always hear is, as a startup, you always have more things to spend money on than you have money to spend it on. And so then you're always trying to say, do I invest this here and get one more employee? Do I get a patent or a trademark? Do I get do I go and get a CFO or get an accountant? Do I get a sales guy? Do I get an HR person? Do I, and the list goes on and on. And then, do I get a building? Which building do I rent? And it goes on and on. And so a lot of those is, hey, you need somebody that's been through that and can say, yeah, you're right. That right now, yes, you need a patent, but this is not the most, important thing to your business. Or no, you really need to protect this. If you're going to go out to angel investors and they're going to hammer you on this, if you don't have a strategy, it's worthwhile the investment. I think that's something that you can oftentimes is overlooked. Oftentimes you don't get, and yet it's the most critical part of what the people are looking for.
Do people, when you're thinking, you think outside the box, do people end up even limiting themselves in a startup mode by how they have defined themselves? Maybe they say, I'm not smart enough, or I don't have the degree to do this, or I think I really got a great idea. There appears to be a market to it. I certainly have the passion for it, but I'm just not enough to pull it off.
Yeah, I would say the number one thing that people talk themselves out is to say, I don't have an MBA. I don't have a business degree. And so I can't go do a startup or small business. I have an MBA, and I can tell you, I learned a whole lot more through doing my own startups and my own businesses than I ever did in MBA school. Not saying it wasn't a good degree and I didn't learn a lot, but as far as doing a startup or small business, I see a lot of people that are much more successful that they don't have to have the degree. And half the time, they don't even have to have the expertise when they start out. They just have a good idea and they can build the people. They pull in the people, say, hey, I've got a good idea. I think it will work. I can execute it on. Now, who do I need to get around me to actually build that from an idea into an actual business? And if you can kind of get those people together, you don't have to have the background. You don't have to have the education, but you do have to have the work ethic, the drive, and the ability to actually manage people and be able to bring the right people on the team. And if you can do that, I think you can really build just about any business into a success.
And I suppose, too, if you're starting something up and it's just you right now and you have a passion for it, but maybe you've got some blinders on because that passion is blinding you and you need some outside advice or you need to surround yourself with the right people and you don't have the money for salaries at the moment, advisors to go out and find trusted advisors that you can sit around with and that are going to challenge you and ask you, do you really think this is going to work, Park? Or have you thought about it this way or this way?
And I would do two things. One, don't put it, or don't only, you can maybe have if you have really smart family members, you can put them on. Otherwise, get outside people that are going to give you that input, that they don't feel like they're going to hurt your feelings. They're not going to dash your dreams. Get people that are going to give you that honest feedback. The other thing that I found, at least it works for me, and because I have 10 ideas before I wake or get to work in the morning. I have another 20 that I have throughout the workday. And by the time I get home, I'm up to 50. And yet, I would say most of them are not good ideas. I think they're good ideas at the time, but what I'll do is if I think there's a good idea, I'll write it down on a sticky note or put it somewhere. I'll circle back in a week, and if I'm still as excited about it in a week as I was when I originally had the idea, then I'll continue to pursue after. And vice versa, if after that week I said, yeah, that was really a stupid idea, then I'll just let it go. So for me, if you put just a little, not a ton of time, don't make excuses. Don't say I'm going to wait a year or I'm going to wait 6 months. Give yourself a week, write it down. Come back to it. If you're still as excited, still think it's a great idea, then absolutely go for it.
That is such an excellent piece of advice because I have had that same problem too. You wake up in the morning and you get all excited about something. And really, sometimes that's just a procrastination mode. You've got to really be doing something over here. But no, I got this great idea, so I'm going to run it down this rabbit hole. And then a day or two goes by and you look back at it and you kind of go, what was I thinking? That didn't make any damn sense. That was a total waste of time.
Exactly. Why did I how did I ever think this was going to make money or be a good idea? And yet at the time you're super excited about it. It's going to change the world. It's going to grow your business 10x. And then you say, well, that's probably not a good idea. So I think that absolutely to your point.
Sec. Devin, I am so bad at that, or used to be. I mean, I love the ideation process, and that's why people hire me, because I got lots of ideas. That I was eating at a Chinese restaurant one day, and I was toiling over an idea, and I opened up the fortune cookie, and you won't believe what the fortune is. I took it and I taped it to my monitor, and it says, I'm sorry. It said, don't mistake temptation for opportunity. And I thought,
that is a smart fortune cookie.
that's very, very wise. And so, yes, I literally have that taped to my monitor. And I'm
going to give you the complete aside, just not because we're on fortune cookies. So I was at a dinner one time with my dad, and he got a fortune cookie that literally said, "Don't go to bed angry, stay up and fight." So that's always my very favorite fortune cookie.
Yeah, there's some wisdom in that as well.
So that has nothing to do with business, but it was a great fortune cookie that was worthwhile to remember.
Life in general. With 2020 and COVID in our upside down, wacky world, number one, how is business for you? Have you been able to navigate this? And number two, what would you say to startups? Is now a good time to launch your startup?
So as weird as it sounds, and I get there, I work with a lot of startups, and some of them are going through hard times, and I absolutely heart goes out to them, want to help them out where I can. For us, it's been the opposite. When I set up the firm, I looked at it as we're going to be a nationwide firm. I'm not going to be a Utah firm. I'm not going to be a local area. And how can I do it? Because patents and trademarks are all on the federal level. I don't have to be barred, and I have to be a bard. I have to be barred. I'm barred in Utah, so I can pass the bar exam. But it doesn't matter which state my clients are. So we really set it up that we can work with anybody. And so COVID, as weird as it sounds, has had the opposite effect for us, is because now people aren't going into the law firms. They're not going downtown. They're not going to the local lawyer. They're now looking and saying, who can I meet with across the nation that's the best? It's actually been an uptick for us. And so, for us at least, it's been on a good trajectory of saying we now have clients that would otherwise have wanted to go to the downtown high rise that aren't, and now they're looking and saying, which law firm is the one that I judge on their merits, not based on the biggest building. So for us, that's good. And for me, I'm of the opinion of anytime there's chaos, anytime there's change in the marketplace, something is different, it presents opportunities because it presents chinks in other people's armor. What are they doing that they could be doing better? Or what caused their failure? Who is not being served, or how are they not being served? And so I'm not saying that anybody would wish anybody on COVID, but you're asking is it a good time to start? I think absolutely, in the sense, a lot of chinks in the armor are being revealed, and a lot of opportunities to how to do things differently, or things that previously weren't thought of, that weren't being done, are now available. And so you can a lot of times have a better ability to compete now than you may have when there's just a status quo.
Mm-hmm. Finally, where can people learn more about you? Now, I know you're the host of the Inventive Journey podcast. So how can people find you, and tell us a little bit about your show?
So I'll give you a few different ways, and probably more than you asked for, but I'll give them to you anyway. So if they want to find out more just about the law firm, easy way to do it is just lawwithmiller.com. That sends it to our law firm website. They can find out more about our prices, our costs, and everything else, and all about myself and the law firm. You can also find out about the Inventive Journey. It's on the website. If they want to, now let's say they're a startup, they're a small business, they want to get some advice, they don't know if they should get going, or even if they need a patent or a trademark or whatever it is, they can go to freestrategymeeting.com. They can go there, grab some time. It links right to my calendar. We'll sit down, probably by Zoom, because nobody wants to go to office buildings anymore, but we'll have a Zoom meeting or a phone call and talk through what they're doing. So Free Strategy Meeting is a great way. If they want to meet with me, just shoot the breeze, find out more about my businesses, be my next best friend, or anything above, they can go to meetdevin.com. And that one is just one where they can also grab some time with me. So those are the three ways: Law with Miller, Free Strategy Meeting, and meetdevin.com. All of those are great ways to reach out to me. If they want to find out more about the podcast, just go search the Inventive Journey podcast. We're on all the major platforms. We're on YouTube. You can also find it on our website. And really, that one is one where, for me, the podcast started is work with a lot of startups, a lot of small businesses, and they all everybody has a unique journeys, different things they go through. And yet I hear the same thing over and over of, it's hard, I'm juggling so many balls in the air. I have to figure out HR. I have to figure out taxes. I have to figure out finance, hiring and firing, how to raise money, how to make payroll. And it's kind of those common threads throughout everybody's journey that everybody has a hard time with. And they always feel like they're alone. They always feel like nobody gets what they're going through. And so the Inventive Journey is really saying, let's talk through their journey of people. Where do they get from? We're not going to just give the highlight reels. It's not like the movie or television, but we're going to actually talk about their journey, what they've gone through, the ups and the downs, the failures and the successes. And in fact, one of the two questions I always ask on the podcast is, what was your worst business decision and what did you learn from it? And it kind of gives you that insight. And it's fun. That's my favorite part of the podcast, is asking what their worst business decision was, because everybody has some great stories about their worst business decision. So that's a little bit about the podcast. If people want to check it out, just go search for Inventive Journey on any of the major podcast platforms and you'll find us.
Will you ask that question of me?
Sure. So what was your worst business decision and what did you learn from it?
It had to do in protecting a copyright, of all things. Had a very large $1 million campaign running in Arizona, and it was a joint venture between me, my agency, and a consultant. And the agency came up with the strategy, the plan, the creative, and all that. And we copyrighted it to protect it. And after a year of a very successful run, the consultant came in and said, no, I own that. And we had to put up, we had to defend our copyright, the fact he did not own it. And, of course, it drugged the client into the middle of it. Long story short, I spent about $60,000 protecting our copyright, which I prevailed. But in the process, spent $60,000, lost the client, certainly the consultant. And I should have probably, in hindsight, just let him have it.
Yeah. And that is a good business. See, it's interesting. It's fun to hear those, not just the highlight reels, but actually what you did wrong. And, if you look back and I always say, there's a legal way of doing things and there's a business way of doing things. And so often you're so tied up and I'm in the right. I can go sue and I'm going to win and I'm going to prove my point. And yet there's a much easier, does this make sense business-wise? Does it actually give a good return? Am I going to keep the client? Is the client going to be dragged through the mud? Should I just pay the independent contractor $5,000 or $10,000 and they'll probably go away? Or should I actually fight it? And so I think that's a great lesson to learn. So now I get to do the interview, that's what I would say is, looking for the business opportunity to solve a solution is oftentimes better than the legal one. And I know that's weird coming from the attorney, but I think that that's the better advice.
I totally agree, because I got caught up with an attorney that was referred into me and he was, let's go after him. And of course he was for the billable hour. And then I had a buddy of mine show up.
It's only going to cost you $100,000 and we'll make you $20,000 in return. Yeah. That's going to be a great deal. And
he was playing off my passion. It was my fault, not his fault. But it was an absolute learning for me. And then I had another friend, a buddy who's an attorney, who came in because it became such a mess. And he just sat down and he goes, Park, what are you doing? And he knew me really well. He says, I think your best bet is just get you the hell out of this as quickly as we can and cut your losses. And he was absolutely right. And so, boy, have I learned. But I was young, very aggressive in that point, and I was pissed off. Someone was trying to take our IP, our creative.
You're right.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter what it's going to cost. You're going to prove it. So, then you look back and you're like, that was really stupid.
I haven't relived that in a long time, but I thought I better share that, given that we're talking about IP today.
All right. Hey, that was a good way to wrap it up.
Well, Devin, thank you so much for being here on the show. Really appreciate your insights. And again, folks, if you've got an interest in, sounds like some free advice just to get the ball rolling in your IP, visit them over there at Law with Miller. Did I say that right? lawwithmiller.com.
You're good. Yep. Or freestrategymeeting.
Or freestrategymeeting.com. Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, man. And enjoy that cold, crisp, snowy weather up there in Utah.
I'll do my best. I'll bundle up a little bit extra when I go out to run and be remembering this podcast.
Right on. Well, thank you, and thank you all for listening to this edition of the Business of Story. Hey, if Devin can be of assistance to you or someone you know or a colleague, or you've got a buddy that's doing a startup, by all means, share this episode with them. Some really, really terrific advice, free advice here on the Business of Story, and visit them over at lawwithmiller.com. If I can be of service to you, you know where to find me, over at businessofstory.com. We have had so much success with this Build a Better Brand Story Sprint. Our first 2 groups are filled up, and now I'm planning 2 more groups for November and December. If you're interested, just ping me at park@businessofstory.com, and I'll shoot you the information on that. And remember to join us again next week when we'll have another story artist here for you, just like Devin. And until then, never forget that the most potent story you will ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks for listening.